Reggie, you mentioned 0 ppm. And Six Sigma gets you to 3.4.
That's a goal. That's a goal. Yeah, that's a goal. Yeah.
So what is the, how do you manage something for 0 ppm? Is it a lot of outgoing inspection, or what are you doing to get to 0 ppm?
In many cases, 0 ppm is a goal.
Okay.
But there are a lot of opportunities to actually to get it and to hit it. Having good quality control with regards to your suppliers on the selection. You can spend a lot of money up front, but it's going to be very much benefited because of the fact that you're going to have someone who is going to be compliant. The other is good quality systems, catching material as it comes in, as far as pre-inspections. One of the things that we do a lot of lockout devices on a lot of our assembly components. So as a result, the fixture will not release a piece until all pieces are accounted for. Torques have been accounted for. The number of screws that have been inserted have been accounted for before the fixture will actually release. And in those cases, you can still actually get hit with poor PPMs because something can go out the door because of a component that you assembled into yours that you did not catch. In some cases, it could be a part that the customer told you to buy that you did not have a choice on. So in those cases, you still have to have good quality to go backwards to actually do the research as well, to validate your position.
And another component, which is something that academics, at least we have a paper on that topic, is this whole idea of sort of voluntary compliance. Because sometimes compliance is because there's a regulation, but voluntary compliance is that you're doing the right thing because it's also good for you and it's profitable for you. So do you have a position on that, the role of sort of government as enabling voluntary compliance by giving you incentives to do the right thing rather than, have a stick telling you to behave a certain way?
Actually, that's the optimal, because if that's the case, there are a lot of companies that want to do business the right way. There are a lot of companies also that are not going to bring undue cost into the process unless it is unless they're told to. So as a result, there is a good chance that a lot of companies will do the right thing, because in many cases they would rather have them and their peers to dictate what policy should be versus actually having policy imposed upon them and at a rate that they may not be able to digest.
And a couple of questions regarding this tree tracking. Aaron, you mentioned that you could track a tree.
Yes.
So now, if there are a bunch of beans in a bag that came from different trees, you can actually say that this bag consists of coffee beans from these trees that were located in these locations in a field?
Yes, you can do that with the blockchain. You would, so getting down to the bean level, we have to figure out mechanisms such as the DNA of the bean maybe.
I see.
As an example, there's Everledger is a company, and what they do is they track diamonds for the conflict materials. So they'll take a digital snapshot of that diamond, and there's 30 or 45 different photographs or images they take, and they upload on a blockchain. So in this sample, if a diamond's stolen or pawned or whatever, if you register it with the Gemological Institute here in America and it's noted as being stolen, you can go to that blockchain snapshot and realize, hey, it was stolen and this is your diamond. So interestingly enough, I'm from Boise, Idaho, and Rich was telling me this when we started talking. He said, hey, I said, one of the problems that I have is the actual coffee bean, right? Getting to that level. I can see I could do it as a package. You can, with the tree, geo-stamp where it was planted, right? You can follow the load of seeds, if they're organic, stamp all that on the blockchain. But how do you get to that individual level? Because that seems very small. And he said, well, we took care of that about 20 years with fries and potatoes in Idaho. Then being able to identify the good ones and the bad ones, and so that information could be digitized now and loaded on the blockchain. And with the advent of compute power, big blockchain databases and such, you can now see this coming to fruition.
And just to emphasize a little bit on Aaron's story is, anything is possible depending on your cost and compliance. And the story that Aaron was referring to is we were doing a project for J.R. Simplot, and J.R. Simplot was a major supplier of French fries to McDonald's. Well, McDonald's quality standards were such that they required each and every individual French fry to have certain quality specifications and terms of length, cube, moisture content, et cetera. And so we created equipment that would actually check each French fry as it individually went down the product line. And if it didn't meet the quality standards, it was kicked out of the line and sold to Burger King.
So just as a quick follow-up, one of the projects that hope it gets funded, but a project that sort of came up is the fact that a lot of material, genetic material in a seed, there's only about 40 or 50% that's used. There's a remaining 40 to 60% that's frivolous. It's in our own bodies. So the question is, can you insert a genetic marker so that all you do is take a sample and there it'll tell you where the seed came from. So it'll bypass all of this thing because it'll basically, as long as there is some place to provide a flag which says, here's a way to read the marker to the location. Now, part of what that's required is that the public gets comfortable with markers being added to the DNA of food. But do you see this? Do you see technologies like these making their way through the system already? Or do you see apprehension regarding this traceability and tracking at this level?
I think it's a combination of both. If you think about technology and our capability to monitor conditions, all right, when I speak, I usually talk a lot about, social media and our capabilities to monitor behavior of consumers. And so if you notice, if you go out to a browser and you sign on to it, you'll start getting ads for recent searches you've made because they're tracking your individual search behavior. If you take into consideration Apple Watches and the biometric moderating that's going on, I've always said the perfect logistics system is, we're getting close to lunchtime, we've been here for a little while, I could really use a nice cold Bud. And Budweiser would just beam me a Bud right away, okay? Well, the way the technology is going now, the biometric monitoring can alert Budweiser that in about 15 minutes, I'm going to have a craving for a Bud, and it will pre-ship the Bud to my location and know that I want a Bud before Bud does. At the same time, if I look back in the supply chain, I can put markers, I can identify different characteristics of data that I can collect. So I can theoretically scan every coffee bean, each and every item, each and every mineral, every capability, identify the unique capabilities of that, and be able to load it into and enter it into the data. So if I have the capability to identify the data and collect the data, digitize the data, I can then induct it into automated information flows that correspond with the material flow of that item. And the key from Aaron's perspective on a blockchain capability is I have the community auditability of each of those transactions as it goes through the supply chain. So, I like to tell people, you have to identify your as is. Where are you at today? But then it's more importantly that you have to evaluate all of the technology from the hype cycle standpoints and things of that nature, but you have to identify the to be. So, Napoleon once said the theoretically perfect is the worst enemy of the good enough, but the reality is you have to start with the theoretically perfect. Let's start with 0 parts per million, okay? And now let's go back and identify our as-is state to say, where are we doing things that are preventing us from that 0 parts per million? And as Reggie eloquently stated, there are a lot of different factors. But the capability to investigate those processes and continuously improve those processes is where more and more companies have to move.
And again, we'll wait for questions from the audience. But one of the questions I have, again, following up for both of you, is with the tracking and the tracing, you can literally pinpoint down to the individual who made the error.
Yes.
And my question is that a good thing? Or will everybody say, look, I don't want to get caught and be held and fired because something happened? Or would we create a situation where you'll sort of know that somewhere in this department there was a problem? So because if we go down to the tracking of the bean, it could be the tracking of the individual who handled the part, who made a mistake, and if there was an error, you would say, boom, Bob, you did it. Do we want that to happen, or do we want that to happen and then have management systems in place saying, yeah, Bob, but we know you tried hard, so it's not your fault? How would this be mediated?
I think we want to have it, and if you looked at sort of the American way of doing business, maybe 20, 30 years ago, I would say no to that, because that would be okay. Well, this is how we get rid of Bob. You know, Bob's problem. Bob's got to go. When you look at the way that we've learned, particularly from the Toyota manufacturing methods. Continuous improvement is the mantra. And as a result, if you have that data and you're using it constructively, you're actually going to continuously improve your process to understand what happened with Bob. Now, it may be just Bob was the reason, but there may be some other things that go into it with regards to either training, understanding of processes, changes in processes, whatever. So doing a root cause analysis to actually determine what happened and what went into this, in theory, it's a great learning experience such that is not a repeatable activity.
You guys have any?
I agree with Reggie, and to expand on a little bit, first of all, yes, we want to identify it. And then the second thing, to your point, was how do we coach management and leadership on how to deal with that?
Right.
So I don't go and say, Bob, you're a bad person, you should be fired. I go and say, Bob, we have a performance issue here that we think we can coach and improve,
Right.
and we can help you not to make this mistake again. And so it's, a lot of it has to do with cultural issues. And how do you manage and create a culture of process improvement in your organization? And that's probably also the biggest barrier to change in an organization, is that culture. Is your culture adaptive to new ideas and receptive to new ideas? Or do you have a culture that is so tight and so rigid that people engage in malicious obedience?
Agreed.
Yeah. So I'm going to stop asking questions, let the audience ask questions, because otherwise it would go on forever. I have lots of questions to ask. Any questions?
Already maybe ready for lunch.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Okay, I thought, Steve, you had students planted in the audience who would ask questions. So one of my follow-up questions to the blockchain was use of smart contracts. So I wanted to say, what did you mean by a smart contract? What's an example of a contract you can sign now that you couldn't sign before without blockchains?
Okay, so there's the concept of recording contracts. Is anybody familiar with that? Okay, here's a little new piece for you. So recording contracts, we have, I'll call natural language contracts, your supplier contracts, your contracts to buy a car, mortgage on your home, anything that is in paper format. With the theory of recording contracts, we take that written contract, most of it's boilerplate, post that onto a blockchain mechanism. Smart contract is the natural language or the algorithmic processing mechanism for the blockchain. So natural language contracts, the paper written contract you sign. Smart contracts, the algorithms and the code that executes this written contract. So with the concept of recording contracts in, we can digitally take the information that's in the contract. We then use that to port over to build your smart contract algorithmic functionality. So the boilerplate is in basic web language. Then the actual provisions that you're measured against in the contract and you're beholden to, the blockchain takes that in the smart contract functionality, automatically validates whether or not you've hit those contractual mechanisms, and is the automated enforcement engine of the blockchain. So in general, when you think about this, then we have the normal written contract, natural language. We port that into, via Ricardian contract methodologies, into the blockchain smart contract. The blockchain takes over, starts processing. An example being, let's say that you have a 3PL logistics rate and you're doing cold chain tracking. So you have a bonus mechanism that if this 3PL or the truck maintains a certain temperature of the product throughout point A to point B, then they'll be bonused. If it hits above the temperature requirements, let's say it was supposed to be 34 and it goes to 40 over a certain time, what happens is that they will be fined. So currently that's argumentative. We have no way to trace that. That's back to my talk about proper data input, consortiums, ecosystems, everybody agreeing to what the rules of the road are. So we have the blockchain then, we write that down, the information's fed to the blockchain through the smart contract mechanism. It validates whether or not the company hit their parameters on the contract, and it'll bonus or it will fine the company. So you leave all the nuances and contract enforcement automated through the actual smart contract blockchain mechanism.
So basically, all these sensors will automatically, when you arrive at the destination, it'll say, okay, you've been dinged $20 or you just earned $30.
That's correct. And so in general, how the philosophy and how it should work is because you've come together with the ecosystem and consortium and agreed to it, because it's open, there's no hidden, we would generally see the happy path where, okay, yes, I agree, there's a fine, the information's there, and instead of a lot of human intervention with the contract, you would go the exception case where there was a real disagreement or dispute between the two parties. And that also lends itself to eliminating a lot of the dispute points that are inherent in the supply chain.
So basically, fewer lawyers.
Fewer lawyers, fewer people. I say you can remarshal the resources to doing productive things like producing new products, running the analytics on the blockchain, et cetera, to find some new opportunity for you.
Can I ask a question of the audience?
Yes,
They're not
absolutely.
asking
Yeah, absolutely. This is called cold calling.
us. In the interest of time,
We have a question there. Kyle has a
okay.
question.
Am I the only one that has them? Is that
Go
okay?
ahead. Go
Okay,
ahead.
all right. So the consensus ecosystem that's the difficult part of getting blockchain to work, right?
Yeah.
So that seems like an extensive contract, but you're still going to have negotiating power in that within how to develop that contract. Yes. However, once it's been established, then the power of blockchain is that the information being decentralized, the power was set up just on that contract. Is there any, what are some additional concerns about that difference in power dynamic between setup and steady state?
Sure. So one thing is you'll want to evaluate the data that you want to put up for, they call it the mainnet, right? So for all the participants, let's say, to interact with and see, and differentiate what's my private data that I want to hold between two companies, and maybe just saying, yes, there was an interaction these two companies had, and they agreed to the outcome, and then load that up there. There's lots, it's very strategically oriented, thinking through it. For instance, I use the scenario of cold chain, so you've got IoT mechanisms, you have sensor readings. What are my devices I'm going to put on the system? What are the acceptable temperatures, readings, all sort of things? What's the outcomes? The other thing is, this is a long term, but you can do an append or a change to the contract. It isn't immutable like the Rock of Gibraltar. There are things, as long as there's agreement amongst the participating organizations, that you can append and change the actual contract. The thing that's nice about that, the blockchain, that's all loaded up there, and so you'll be able to keep track of those changes and the agreement therein.
Yeah.
My quick question, how many of you are familiar with who Tata Consultancy Services are? Not too many. Just by way of introduction, Tata Consultancy Services is the largest IT and business consulting firm from India, and we are probably the 5th largest business and IT consulting firm in the world. We have $18 billion in revenue. We have over 400,000 employees globally, and we are part of the Tata Group. Tata Group is a group of companies that represent over $100 billion in revenue, have over 1 million employees, and we are 60% owned by philanthropic trusts. So we're not governed by the traditional Wall Street rules and regulations. Some of the other Tata Group companies that you may be familiar with, We own Jaguar Land Rover, and I wish I got an employee discount. We own Tata Motors, Tata Steel, Tata Communications. If you ever get to London and take the Heathrow Express, all the cars are sponsored by Tata Communications. And if you're a tea drinker, we also own Tetley Tea. So it is a very large corporation with some pretty interesting and, in my opinion, from a career-long ways, some very interesting corporate values and capabilities. So if you're looking for a position after graduation, we hire a lot of people.
You have another question? Yeah.
Yes. One of the things you said, to start this supply chain initiative, you need a consortium. So can you give an example of how do you start that? Who starts it, who initiates it, and how does someone get it organized?
Go ahead, I'll let you start.
Sure. So how you would look at that is you need an organization that wants to do blockchain, I don't want to just implement technology to find a problem. I have a problem, I know there's information availability, visibility, bullwhip effect, all these type of problems. Act as the driver, if you will. You cannot act as the owner of the blockchain because that is, in my mind, detrimental to the methodology and philosophy of the blockchain. But you have a driver, and you have to get some strategic partners in place with you to build out and define your values, your strategies, what kind of smart contracts, what you're going to do with the blockchain, information availability. So in MDM, Rich had mentioned, it's the same kind of concept is around the governance and rules of the road that you're going to drive towards. So you have to have an executive level sponsorship, and I would say at least 2 or 3 strategic partners to jump in with you and start building it out. It is very intensive thinking, strategic, et cetera. You're not going to do it in a couple months, likely.
I have a question. This is in regards to Mr. Henderson's impact on regulatory federal policy and ethics. In talking about good policy, so with the tariffs that came along recently, that required some shift in where we're buying product. It may have shifted sometimes from China back to the U.S., and some of those sources don't have enough open capacity to provide product, and so then you're limiting the end customer on being able to, the suppliers on being able to build product for the end customer. You may have made we may feel that that's the right choice initially, but then how do we address that shortage or that shortcoming of product that can be sold to the end customer? Or do you say, hey, you can't have it this year, but 2 years down the road?
Well, what happens is a couple of things. Many companies, particularly in manufacturing, will dual source. You'll dual source this to make sure that you got you're covered in case of some type of exposure, whether it be a natural disaster or what have you. So that may be an option. Even in some cases, you may be dual sourcing from the same region, which may be affected by the same tariff, and then you're in trouble there. But what happens is a little bit broader than that. I think it's something that a lot of folks, unless you're in manufacturing or that sector of business, that you don't realize is that that's where ethics are really going to be tested, because they're going to be. That's when a true opportunity is going to come up where someone's going to say, "I need to find a way out of this. I've got constraints by my customer. I've got fixed pricing by them." I may have the opportunity to do a price increase, but it may take me months to build a case, even though they know that because they're buying from that same region as well. And in the short term, I've got to get relief because, oh, by the way, depending upon if I work for an auto manufacturer, I may be part of a long-term agreement that says I have to give 5% cost reductions over a 3-year period. So you got this squeeze. That's when ethics really comes into play, because at that point, your ethics and your morals and your values are going to be tested, because you may be pushed into corners to survive. More mature businesses in many cases should have relief valves, if you will, in place for that sort of thing, because people have been through it a time or two. But in other cases, it may be a situation where, excuse me, you take a risk on someone that is untested. That's a very difficult question to answer. It's a very good question, and it's a very good point. But in some cases, there is no way out. And then in that case, what happens is you start to see shortages on the shelf or shortage of availability. And then the consumer is affected because of the fact that the prices are going to go up.
I think in a different context, we face some of that here at the university. And what we encourage is that get the information up the chain as quickly as possible. Because it's possible that somebody further up the chain is that we'll cover it and it's gone. Because if you leave it at a level where there is no relief valve possible, then it's possible that there's a lot of temptation to find an alternate solution.
Oh, yeah.
But if you allow people to bring up bad news, I think there was a presentation somebody said that, rather than showing all the slides which said, oh, we did what we got paid to do, bad news first, because that's what we have to do something about. Because the good news, where everything went well, we don't need to celebrate. That's what everybody gets paid to do.
Right.
So the question for us is also, and this happens with faculty and staff and so on and so forth, where we say, if there is a problem, as soon as possible, get it up the chain, because somebody can do something about it. Sometimes it involves financial costs. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
And those things are material to the business, but that's what somebody further up the chain is meant to do, to take that, explain it to everybody and say, hey, we had a problem, we had to deal with something and we dealt with it. So at least for us, that's what we encourage. Most of the time, if we treat bad news as shoot the messenger, that's when we get all kinds of things happening that really, in some sense, we created, because, so at least that's our experience with it. Any other questions? So if not, I think food is ready and it's beckoning. I don't know whether there's a bud that's going to be waiting there for you, because we're a dry campus. At least this portion of campus is dry, where students are. So yeah, there is a bar that Purdue has called 1869, where you can drink Boiler Gold, which I think you'll really enjoy. But no, please, let's take the time to thank our speakers who've been very generous with the gift of their time. So we have a couple of wonderful speakers in the afternoon. Faith Wandry from American Axle, and there's Carolyn Dygas from Starbucks, and we're going to ask her about blockchain for beans, okay, to see if they've already implemented it. So we look forward to enjoy lunch, enjoy mingling with everybody. I hope the students take the opportunity to introduce themselves to our. Okay. So I hope the students take the opportunity to meet all of our guests from industry. For many of you who are visiting us from away from campus, Steve tells me that the students will be available to take you over to the engagement center. This is the place we're trying to get our students to be thinking about technology. So again, have a great lunch. Thank you. Thank you very much. Cool. Thank you again. Great comments. Thank you.